really didn't want to come all the way up here. Thank you, Jan, for making me record this and come up to the most uncomfortable place in this entire building for me. Thank you. Thank you very much. But I'm sure that you guys have noticed that around this time of year, all major magazines release an issue with special pictorial sections recalling people and major events that made news throughout the previous year. Many of these magazines also include articles by experts predicting what they expect to see happening in years to come. Some of these predictions, they're pretty accurate. Others, not so much. For example, in 1967, experts predicted that by the turn of the century, technology would have taken over so much of the work that the average American would only have to work 22 hours a week and only 27 weeks a year. As a result, one of our biggest problems would be deciding what to do in our leisure time. I don't know about you guys, but I don't have that luxurious of a work week. I work 40, a little bit more some weeks, and I certainly don't work 27 weeks a year. I work every single week. In fact, most of us seem to be very busy. We're constantly in a rush. We walk fast, we talk fast, we even eat fast. And after we eat, all too often we have to stand up and say, "Excuse me, I have to run." So here we are, on the final Sunday of 2015. I wonder how we'll do in the year to come. Will we be busy, as always? Or will we make better use of our time? In the 365 days this year is over, will we be looking back with joy or with regret? Will we be looking at the future with anticipation or with dread? There's a passage that if you guys would turn with me to, we can take a lot from it in the year to come. Just turn to Ephesians 5:15 through 17. And it reads, "See then that you walk circumspectly, not as fools, but as wise, redeeming the time because the days are evil. Therefore do not be unwise, but understand what the will of the Lord is." You can get a lot out of these three verses. The first part that we can get out of it is, first of all, be careful. We live in our time on earth is limited. The psalmist wrote in Psalms 39:4, "Show me, O Lord, my life's end and number of my days. Let me know how fleeting my life is." And again in Psalms 90:10, it reads, "The days of our lives are 70 years, and if by reason of strength they are 80 years. Yet their boast is only labor and sorrow, for it is so soon cut off, and we just fly away." Psalmist also tells us to number our days so we can develop a heart of wisdom. In 1995, People's Magazine published an article entitled "Dead Ahead," telling about a new clock that would track how much longer you had to live. It calculates the average lifespan, 75 years for a man, 80 for a woman. So you program your sex, your age, any health issues you had. You put it all into the clock, and from there on, it would tell you how much time you had left to live. Hearing about this product merely in preparation for tonight, I didn't buy one, but it was quite the intriguing idea. Thinking about this product, the psalmist's advice to number our days, I added it all up. If I were to live to be 75 years, I have just about 9,600 days left. It seems like a lot, but it's also not so much. It's under 10,000 days. So what am I to do with that life? When I was doing the calculations for it, I was sitting at work in the break room. It just seemed like a lot of work. I work 5 out of my 7 days of the week, so that means I'm going to work about 8,000 of those days, and another 3,000 of those days I'm going to spend sleeping. That doesn't really add up to me. So instead of thinking about it that way, I had the completely wrong thought process. We need to imagine or remember that our lives are fleeting. We're not guaranteed tomorrow. In fact, the Bible tells us not to count on tomorrow because tomorrow may not come for you or for me. All we have is right now. So our time spent on earth is priceless, because time is our most limited resource. The second point that I took from Paul's letter to the Ephesians is make the most out of every opportunity, and his reasoning was because the days are evil. We believe that Satan is a robber and a thief, and one of the things he tries to rob from us is our time. Just think of all the times that we've wasted in sin. Think of the time wasted in bars, or casinos, or in other shallow affairs. Think of the time wasted in gossiping, or spreading rumors. Or think about the time wasted worrying about the consequences of the sins that we've already committed, and the consequences we've already faced. But it's not just sin that makes demands. If you recall in Luke 10, Jesus went to the home of Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. He sat down to teach, and Mary was sitting at his feet, soaking in every word. Meanwhile, Martha was in the kitchen preparing dinner. Now we all know this story. Martha gets upset because Mary is in the kitchen, is not in the kitchen as well. So she complains to Jesus in verse 35, "Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do work by myself? Tell her to help me." And his response is, "Martha, Martha, you are worried and upset about many things, but only one thing is needed. Mary has chosen what is better, and that won't be taken from her." Now, is Martha committing a sin by fixing a meal in the kitchen? No, of course not. But here's her problem. She was too preoccupied with what she was doing and failed to realize that the Son of God himself was sitting in her living room, whose meal she was preparing for him. It's the same mistake you and I make almost every day. We get so caught up in the here and now that we fail to deal with the eternal, the things that last forever. A medical doctor by the name of Richard Swenson wrote in a book which discusses one of the major maladies of our time, anxiety and stress. He calls it an overload. We have 4 main overloads in our life. First, we're committed with commitments. Our social calendars are full. We'd rather spend time watching a football game than being here on a Sunday night. Secondly, we're overloaded with possessions. Our closets are full and our garages are overflowing. We go into debt to pay for the things that we simply must have. And then we worry that someone may steal it. Thirdly, we are overloaded with work. We get up early, we fight traffic, and we suffer intolerable working conditions because we have to have it. We're going to have to pay for all the possessions that we've accumulated. There's also an information overload. He said that as a doctor, he has to read 220 articles a month just to keep up with his profession. And now with the internet, there's an information superhighway. The problem is we can't simply absorb it all. Well, I could obviously go on these, what we're overloaded with in life, but I presume you all get the point. There are many demands on our time, and so many good things left undone. And the final thing that I drew from Ephesians was, understand what the Lord's will is. To answer this, Paul tells us, do not be foolish, but understand what the Lord's will is. Now, what do you think God's will is for you in the coming year? Do you think he wants your mind to be saturated with worries and anxieties? Do you think he wants your social calendar so crowded you can't make any time for him at all? Let me just make a couple of suggestions. First, we must establish our priorities. I'm assuming that since everyone here is here every single time the doors are open, that God is number 1 on your priorities list. But we have to understand where he stands in our life. And I'm hoping that going into the following year, your relationship with God is the most important to you. If so, then he's at the top of your list. And allow it to affect your decisions, your schedules, relationships, and your overall outlook on life. Secondly, we need to set time aside to pray and to read his word daily. We must also set aside time for our families, not just our blood family, but with each other. We all gather here on Sunday mornings. Some come back on Sunday evenings. Even fewer come back on Wednesdays. But do we really even know each other's lives like we should? We're supposed to be brothers and sisters, but I personally couldn't name any personal fact about most of you guys. I've known you all for about 10 years, about 20 years, and we barely even know each other. We haven't actually sat down to have a conversation outside of walking and walking out. We rush all too quickly to leave the building, just like we're marking off a checklist. We come here, we show up, we do the 5 acts, we pray, we preach, we sing, we give, we take the Lord's Supper. But does it really mean everything to us? We're just doing our checklist. We've shown up for the week. Great. I'll see you next week, if we make it. With that, we have to learn to live for today. Like Daryl said this morning, we've fallen into a routine. I drive to work every day. I can't tell you that any specific detail about the drive. I've made it for 2 years now. I know where to turn. That's about it. I don't pay attention. I listen to the radio. We're all too distracted with life. And John Lennon said, it's somewhere on here. Give me 1 sec to find out my place again. John Lennon said, life is what happens to you while you're away making plans, doing something else. It's rather true, isn't it? Another year has come and almost gone. And a new year is stretching before us. During the new year, may you have enough happiness to keep you sweet, enough trials to keep you strong, enough sorrow to keep you human, enough hope to keep you happy, enough failure to keep you humble, enough success to keep you eager, enough wealth to meet your needs, enough enthusiasm to make you look forward to tomorrow, and enough determination to make each day better than the last. I'm not really good at this whole prolonging sermons thing, because I have already reached my conclusion. So I will conclude by reading one final verse from Romans. If you would turn with me to Romans 13, beginning at verse 11. Beginning at verse 11, and it reads, and do this, knowing the time, that now it is high time to awake out of sleep. For now our salvation is nearer than when we first believed. The night is far spent, the day is at hand. Therefore let us cast off the works of darkness, and let us put on the armor of light. I don't really have a full explanation for this. I just thought it was a nice little concluding note. So with that, I will give you my sermon and step down to a more comfortable